Hi, I'm Chrissy. If you have had a regular mammogram and then been called back for a diagnostic mammogram, I want you to know what happened to me after I was told the same thing, especially if you're scared, because I was scared too. More than 5 years later, there's one thing I have kept coming back to: hope. And I don't mean the kind where someone tells you, "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing," because they don't know that. And sometimes it isn't nothing. A good friend of mine recently went through this whole process. She got called back after her regular mammogram. She went through the diagnostic and then was sent for an ultrasound. She got all the way to her biopsy, and it was benign. Mine wasn't. My biopsy showed breast cancer, and I'm not telling you that to scare you. In fact, I hope to do the opposite. Because if you're somewhere in between, you saw something on your mammogram and getting an answer, is it cancer? Is it all clear? It's easy to start feeling that every next step is another step towards a cancer diagnosis. It certainly felt that way for me. So I want to walk you through what actually happened during my diagnostic mammogram, not because your outcome will be the same as mine, but because sometimes knowing what might happen next can make walking through it a little less scary. And because I know something now that I couldn't have known back then. You can go through this whole process and still get good news. And if you don't get the good news that you desperately hope for, I'm more than 5 years into remission for breast cancer. There's hope on that side as well. So, I had my regular mammogram and they found something suspicious. And then I was back at the hospital for the mammogram upgrade that nobody wishes for, the diagnostic mammogram. I checked in, gave them my information, handed over my insurance card, and they slapped one of those plastic medical bracelets on my wrist. And I remember twisting it thinking, "Hello, universe? What the heck am I doing here?" And I had this refrain running through my head: hope I don't have cancer. Nah, no way do I have cancer. I hope. The diagnostic mammogram was more involved than the regular one had been. More positioning, more images, and the technician was nice but reserved. I had a lot of questions, and she had remarkably few answers. Looking back, I understand that there were things that she couldn't possibly have told me. They were still gathering information, and she didn't know anything for sure, even if she did see something. But at the time, I felt like I was being stonewalled. And there was another problem making everything harder. This was during COVID, and I'm profoundly hearing impaired. So I'm already scared. I'm standing in a hospital gown. I can't read anyone's lips. I'm struggling to understand what's being said. And when I can't understand, I felt like nobody was answering my questions. The chief radiologist would review the images and give me the findings after the ultrasound, if there was going to be an ultrasound. And I asked, well, how do you know if there's going to be an ultrasound? And was simply told to hold my breath. And she took another image. No answer to my question. Eventually, she finished the imaging and left the room. And I waited. That's something I remember very clearly. Waiting. Sitting very, very still. Somehow it felt safest to stay still, thinking, I hope I don't have cancer. No way do I have cancer. And then the technician came back. The radiologist wanted the ultrasound. She told me it didn't necessarily mean anything. Sometimes they needed additional imaging so they could advise patients accurately. And I remember thinking, thank you for that, saying literally nothing at all. I wasn't satisfied with that answer because in my mind, somebody had seen something on the first mammogram. Now the technician had taken all those additional pictures. The radiologist had looked at them, and now she wanted an ultrasound. Clearly, somebody was seeing something. And that's an important distinction that I make now that I couldn't make very well back then. Seeing something isn't the same as knowing what that something is. That's why I was there. That's why they were doing more tests. And sometimes those tests lead to another test. It doesn't mean that you've received your diagnosis by increments. It means they still need information. I know that's not nearly as comforting when you're the one waiting there, but it matters. The ultrasound technician came in, and the first technician stayed. They looked at the screen and pointed, now and then saying to one another, there, or no, there. Click, click, click. I couldn't see the ultrasound screen, but I knew exactly where she was spending most of her time. The same side that had gotten me called back there in the first place. And I remember thinking, they must know. They must know. Eventually, they left me alone again, and I swung my legs around and sat up on the table. And again, I stayed very still. I willed myself to just be still, thinking, I hope I don't have cancer. Then the radiologist came in. Finally. She explained that she couldn't determine from the imaging whether the suspicious findings were benign. I needed a biopsy. There it was, the next step. And I wanted her to tell me what it meant. Not what it could mean, what she thought it meant. I basically said, you're the chief radiologist for this hospital. You've looked at my images. You must have an opinion. What's your best guess? Is this breast cancer? And she told me that approximately 80% of women they send for biopsies were found not to have cancer. And I grabbed onto that number like she'd throw me a life preserver. Okay, so you're saying there's only about a 20% chance that this is cancer. Not totally reassuring, 20% is still a high number, but it was something. It was something to wrap my head around. But no, that's not what she was saying. She very carefully then explained that she was giving me the overall statistic, not estimating my individual chances based on my imaging. And I stared at her thinking, then why the heck did you just tell me that? I was trying so hard to get certainty out of people who could not give that to me. I felt like they must know and they couldn't tell me. Looking back, I understand it was more complicated. They knew that they had seen something concerning. They knew that they couldn't tell me from the imaging whether it was benign or cancer. They knew I needed a biopsy to find out. And I wanted to skip that horrible space between those things and get to the answer. I couldn't. Nobody can. So what could I do? Over and over, since the first warning flag had been raised, I came back to hope. Because at that point, hope was the only thing I could control. I couldn't control what was on those images. I couldn't make the technicians tell me something that they didn't know. I couldn't make the radiologist promise me it wasn't cancer. And once I had the biopsy, I couldn't make those results come back any faster either. I could only keep moving to the next step and hope. My friend's next step eventually brought her the words benign, all clear. I am so incredibly glad it did. Mine eventually brought me the words breast cancer. And here's what I wish I could tell the me sitting in that examination room all those years ago. Hope wasn't foolish just because I ended up having cancer. All that hope did not become meaningless and for nothing when I did not get the result that I had hoped for. It just had to move. First, I had hoped that nothing was wrong. Then I hoped the biopsy would be benign. And when it wasn't, eventually I started hoping for other things. That treatment would work, that I would get through it, that I would see the other side of it. And along the way, I learned to hope for something larger than anything specifically to do with cancer. Everything else that was still happening around the cancer stuff came back into focus as well. And the ability to go through something like that, but still laugh with my kids or enjoy a pizza or whatever good the days may bring along with the nonsense, it continues to serve me well, for which I'm grateful, especially as all that good stuff has been brought into sharper focus. In life, very seldom is short on introducing new nonsense. So if you're watching this because you've just been called back for a diagnostic mammogram, or have any reason to hope, you don't know yet. That's frightening. But not knowing isn't the same thing as knowing something bad. The next test is not your diagnosis. The biopsy is not your diagnosis. There are women who get all the way through the process and hear all clear. I hope with everything I've got that you're one of them. And if you're not, there's still hope. There's hope there too. I know, because that's where my story went next, while I was waiting to pick up a pizza. But that's another story. For now, get the test, ask your questions, and while you wait for the answers that won't be hurried and that you cannot control, hold on to hope. If you found anything here useful, please subscribe. It really supports this channel, and I appreciate it very much. If you know anyone who could benefit from this video, please share. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'll see you in the next video.